Well, welcome to episode 11 in season 3 of C.A.R.s Coffee and Christ, the weekly podcast here at Cross Automotive Royale, or C.A.R. for short. We're located in Mounds, Oklahoma, right outside the Tulsa Metroplex area. And I'm your host, Ross Turner. I serve as corporate chaplain here at C.A.R., where we're going to build today on a former episode from season 1. Is that actually episode 4 on spiritual warfare today. And that episode was called Engaging Spiritual Warfare. So I want to start by just saying I refer you to listen to that episode first if you have the time. We'll do a little bit of a rehash today on some of that, so it's not completely jumping in right away, but I'm going to refer you to listen to that because we're going to build on that discussion today, because that talks about the general nature of spiritual warfare. But today we're going to talk more about the ongoing nature of spiritual warfare, and it can be surprising how it keeps coming up, or certain things keep coming back in your life. And this is spiritual warfare that we're talking about in regards to the Christian faith. So I've titled today's discussion, Don't Be Surprised, Revisiting Spiritual Warfare. And we're going to be talking about the ongoing conflict as Christians that we encounter. And it could be in the world, it could be in your own personal life, it could be at home, it could be at work, it could be all the above. So today with me, as always, our co-founders and co-owners, Joshua and Abigail King, are with us. We also have Hunter Massey there in the corner. Thanks, Hunter, for joining us today. Works as one of our techs in our shop. We also have JJ Clark, who works as our mechanic in our shop as well. So thank you all for making the time at the end of our week today. And I'm excited to talk about something that we're probably all experiencing to some level right now. But I thought to start us off, because we don't want to assume all of our listeners know exactly what we're talking about, I thought it would be good to open up with just a few verses and then kind of get our bearings a little bit about what do we mean by spiritual warfare, and who experiences spiritual warfare. So we'll start with me reading Romans 8, and this is from verses 7 and 8, and says this: "The mind governed by the flesh is hostile to God. It does not submit to God's law, nor can it do so. Those who are in the realm of the flesh cannot please God." All right. So for the uninitiated, right, for people who are not initiated to what we mean by spiritual warfare, it might be good just to begin by asking you all who might not be experiencing spiritual warfare in the way that we're talking about it. You've entered into the fray, you're walking with God, you desire to do the things that He wants. Who might that not pertain to, according to Romans, that they might not be aware that there's a spiritual conflict going on? Yeah, unbelievers. Yeah. So people that are not initiated. You know, there are a lot of people, and again, we're not trying to be pejorative here. We're simply saying it's just an objective fact. Certain people don't experience this because they're kind of going downstream. So there's a sense of unbelievers don't experience spiritual warfare. They might experience a lot of misery or suffering or problems like that, but they're not experiencing what we're talking about. Yeah. Anyone else want to speak that? Because that might be someone who's listening right now. Anyone else? Why are they not experiencing this thing that we're going to spend the next 30, 40 minutes talking about?
Yeah, I would say those that are on the fence.
Yeah.
Because there's an old adage that, the person's like, well, I'm not over here and I'm not over there. I'm on the fence.
That's right.
I'm still undecided. Yeah. Well, the problem is Satan owns the fence.
That's right.
Because it is, it is a full decision,
yes,
right, to be in. And so that would be those others that think, those could be people that are just not really fully committed. Maybe they go to church, but they're not in, you're not in it yet.
That's right.
That would be that other group.
Yes.
I would say is like, kind of like, I've never experienced this, but I'm a Christian. There's a saying or a verse in the Bible that says, "But Lord, we've cast out demons in your name, and and done all these things in your name." But He says, "Depart from me, I never knew you." So it says, without a relationship with God.
That's right. That's a great way of putting it, Joshua. I think that there's a lot of religious people who don't experience this too.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's a difference between being maybe in some kind of visible kind of group way and actually being committed to the things of God and the kingdom of God. And while it sounds a little shocking to say that there might be some non-overlap there, the Bible's really clear that sometimes they don't overlap. Jesus is saying, hey, you might have done all those things, but you did them without my permission and lawlessly, so like you did it without any authority, so these are extremely religious people talking to Jesus.
Yes, the Pharisees were not on Jesus.
No, they're on their own team. You know what I mean? You know, it's kind of like I used to have this student in my youth ministry many years ago. Loved the guy to death, but he'll always show up whenever he wanted. And so we used to always say, that's on Ethan's time. So they might be religious, but they're on their own time. They're doing their own thing, their own will. And the reality is they're doing them, right? And so, again, there can be very religious people who actually aren't really in the fray whatsoever. So those that are initiated truly into the Christian kind of way of life and also the kingdom of God experience what we're about to talk about. They all experience spiritual warfare. It is full-on warfare. Now, it is not always the same degree. Not everything is like an Armageddon kind of thing, but there is always ongoing warfare to some degree. So just kind of want to get that up front, you know, and then secondly, kind of make sure that people understand who or what are we fighting? If we're in a war, what does the Bible say we are fighting or what we're fighting? And then what are we not fighting? Because there's a pretty big lot of difference between what a lot of Christians think are the enemy when the Bible's saying they're not. And then there's some people that have no clue what we're supposed to be fighting, and they're just kind of watching other people suffer and go down for the count. So what are we fighting against? If we're in the fray, what are we called to fight? Who and what are we called?
Yeah, so there's a verse on the side of my office that's, you know, for we do not fight against flesh and blood. Yeah. So that would mean that we do not fight against people.
That's right.
However, we fight against rulers, powers, authority,
principalities
and powers, powers of the dark,
of the unseen
of our age.
Yes,
right. All the wicked stuff of your nightmares. That's what you fight against. And so there's another layer that you know most people don't know. You know, you could think of it in three places. You've got what we see, the life we, you know, the place we normally settle into, the physical.
The physical.
Then you've got this spiritual space that I don't, you know, a lot of people call it, there are a lot of different things, but that's where the angels and demons are fighting it out. Like the angel who was coming to Daniel, well, I had to fight through the Prince of Persia to get here.
That's right.
Where was that? That was not in the physical world you're seeing. And then there's heaven, which God said he's separated. He put a great void or chasm or however you want to, in the early Genesis, between here and those places and where he is, because he's holy and set apart. So you've got like these three zones at least that, you know, like that it talks about in the Bible. And so it's good to know about that, right? Because we often, you know, we attribute a lot of what we experience, think, or whatever to us and our own physical self. And you're really missing a lot of the picture.
Right. So first, Josh, you've really kind of locked in on this unseen realm, this principalities and powers. That's why we call it first and foremost a spiritual warfare, right? So we're very adamant. We want to agree with the Bible. We're not fighting against people. We're not fighting against countries. We're not fighting against, you know, certain backgrounds or something like that, or certain voting blocks or political parties necessarily. Now, they can certainly be aligned with them, but we're not necessarily fighting that directly. We're fighting against something much greater and more powerful and sinister than that, at least this unseen realm. What else are we fighting in the spiritual battle? What else would we include?
Our own will.
Us. That's right. If there's anyone to blame for the fight, it is me. That's right. We're fighting against ourselves. And that's the thing I think a lot of unbelievers don't understand. They think just because you're in, that suddenly you're victorious all the time. You are victorious in an ultimate sense, but you're not victorious in the moment all the time. And we're constantly having to fight us. In fact, most days, we're the biggest problem. To be honest, you know, we're the ones that are fighting against us, and we're the biggest issue. There's kind of a funny statement, but it's true. The church said, "I've seen the enemy, and it is me." And that's, man, that is true. You know, so there's this thing called the sin nature, you know, the flesh. There's all these different terms the Bible uses, but we're fighting against myself, right? Constantly. So we got this unseen realm. We've got ourselves, what we call the flesh or sin, the sin nature. What else are we fighting? Or who else are we fighting? Anyone else we could include in that?
This whole conversation, it kind of just makes me think of, you know, Waterboy.
Yeah.
Where I feel like, too, that there's different camps where you totally disregard the sin nature and what you said, JJ, about it being us, right? Because that's the devil, devil made me do it.
Yes.
And ignoring
Yes.
Personal responsibility and your sin nature. And then you could have one camp that totally ignores that.
Correct.
Yeah, sometimes it is the devil.
Yes.
That's
right.
So you can't ignore.
That's right.
Either camp.
That's right.
Because it's
a great
both.
It's a great way of saying it, Abigail, is that there's the sense of that both are true. The unseen realm is very true. It's it's more real than we know. But all three of those things are part of the foe, the enemy. And it is us, it is the devil, and it is the world. That's how the Bible seems to describe it. The great Christian thinkers call it the unholy trinity, the unholy kind of forces that are against us. And so, it's kind of a strange thing to think about. And sometimes it's like, wow, do I really want to be a part of this? But the reality is you become a Christian and your ticket is now you get to, here's a gun, here's a shield, here's a sword, get in there. Like, it's like very different than like, okay, now I'm good to go. No. You just got started. And so it's very challenging, I think, for people that are not initiated to understand that this is what it means to become a Christian in like negative sense, in the sense of the forces you're up against. You really get thrown into a battle that keeps on waging, and you're in. And you might not be fully aware of it until you get baptized by fire.
Yeah, you're forged in fire.
Yeah, you're forged in it. So again, it's not how a lot of Christians talk, but the Bible talks like this, which is, I think, the problem. Is that most Christians just want a pat on the back and, the preacher tell you're doing a great job and go home, here's your advice. And that is not what the Bible's saying. And again, I hate to say it as a preacher myself, but that's what most people want you to say. And you get up there and say, well, this is actually what it's saying. And so the good news is better than the bad news, but we got to talk about the challenge to it too. So anything else you want to add before we kind of jump into the ongoing nature?
Yeah. Well, what I would say too is for those who are the ones on the outskirts, the ones that aren't driven in, like they're still experiencing the 2 out of the 3 of the unholy.
That's right.
Right? Like you are still experiencing your own sinful nature. That's right. You are still experiencing the world. Correct. Right? It's just that one leg that you're not experiencing, but those of us who are in it, we may experience that third, but like you said, we've got those weapons.
That's right.
At least. So it's not like you're completely, you're like
experiencing it, but in a way like you're kind of going with the flow.
Yeah.
It's kind of a problem. You're on the same path.
Yeah.
So you're not showing any resistance to the enemy. Yeah. It's kind of the problem, is that you're in it, but you're not really resisting it. So you haven't, in a dystopian novel, you've not become aware, in a sense, of the enemy. Like you're actually being controlled, maybe very lightly, maybe very forcefully, but you're actually being controlled and led by the enemy. And so you're kind of part of the enemy's scheme instead of, oh, no, I need to join the resistance. Yeah. And when you're in spiritual warfare as a Christian, you've joined the resistance, basically.
There's 2 things I wanted to kind of talk about before we move on to the next.
This is great. This is great.
There's an analogy the Lord gave me about the battle. Okay, so imagine 2 different armies, one in one thicket and the other. I like to think of the Civil War because it just feels like they got out of thickets. But like there's one forest, another forest clearing in the middle, right? One side you've got the Lord's army, and the other side you've got the enemy's army, right? And they're about to fight it out on this battlefield. But before that happens, Satan walks out and he says, "Hey, everybody, I know this is going to be bad, but if just over in this third thicket, there is a lazy boy. I've got some sports on. Yeah. We've got some activities over there. It's going to be really cozy. I've even put an air conditioning in a geodesic dome. You can just hang out and just completely avoid that. That is the biggest group in the world. Yeah. That is not. Most people are not in the fight. No. Most people are not on one side or the other. There's not it's not just like the Satanists versus the other people that have completely picked a camp and are actively fighting. Yeah. The majority of people have just chosen the world. They've chosen the temptation of the world, the riches of the world, the power of the world, the structures of the world. They have chosen the world and comfort. Yes. And that is, I think, what we fight more than anything in the church is the complacency of comfort. Absolutely. And so anyways, I think that is one of the things we fight in that, which is the world. The second thing is, well, how do, just take a self-inventory. Like, where, the world has had to use words now like trigger and other stuff that is just substitutions for the same stuff that we've classified years ago.
Yeah.
Basic inventory of the things that are have caused your warfare or give the enemy a foothold to attack you are your agreements with the enemy. What are the things that you believe that are not what are in the Bible? Mm-hmm. Those are your agreements with the enemy. Those are open doors to your life. The second is the wounds. Have you ever been hurt? Where are the places that come back and over and over and over? Yes. Those are the triggers that people talk about nowadays, but it's just a wound. It's just a wound deep in the past. Yeah. We no one gets through this life unscathed. And then the enemy pushes on that wound and hurts you over and over, and in order to get you to behave in and outside of how the Lord has designed you to be. Right. And then you've got sin, which is just your way over God's way.
That's right.
The easiest way to describe sin is you've chosen your way, and there's God's way, but you've chosen your way to live your life. That's it. I will make myself God, and I will learn of you will be like God if you acknowledge my way versus His way. Then the last is, I would say, unforgiveness. Mm-hmm. This is like, I don't know, spiritual warfare 101. Just do an inventory across your life. Forgive everyone that's hurt you. Come into alignment and submission to God. Ask the Lord to heal the hard parts of your life and stop agreeing with the enemy and start just reading the word every day and start agreeing with that instead. And that is it. And it's called the renewing of your mind. It's all in there. It's all in the Bible. It just, that is such a helpful thing, an exercise that'll help you understand, no, I'm in it, because I always, about once a week, I get triggered on X. This one thing, or, not the platform, just this thing, there's no, if you ever said it, there's no way I could forgive this person because of X, what they did to me. Or if you say, this thing that they say in church, but I don't really believe it. Or if you're a denomination that has chosen to take steps back against what the Lord has said in His word and are trying to justify out the word of God. Oh, well, you've agreed with the enemy there. That's right. Because He is consistent yesterday, today, and forever. His word stands in eternity and will live long beyond the earth. And these are things that just are immovable forces. And so just take that inventory, and you'll help yourself out in your life a lot just by walking through that. Yeah. But that's the territory the enemy has grabbed in our lives. For sure. Right? That's the warfare, is to grab that territory in people's lives to get the bigger and greater hold on them.
Well, I love that's also a way to just show how we can talk about how we fight in this ongoing spiritual conflict, because I think that's what's again, I've been a Christian, I think probably for about 30 something years of my life, and I still get surprised by trial. I still get surprised by how relentless the enemy is. I do. Even this past week I did. I was out, and I'll start it with a story, then we'll jump into the text and talk about it. But I was out home after work this week, and I was out working on my yard, and then I've been in Costa Rica for almost more than a week. And I finally got back, and I hadn't mowed the yard in 7 or 8 days. And I mean, it took like 12 40-volt batteries to take this thing down, because it's so high. And then the little old lady who I always see walking her dog was out there. I was like, I'll also have the Roundup, and I'm not supposed to use that, but whatever. And I'm spraying it around all the flower beds or whatever, killing the weeds, And the little old lady comes by. She's like sweet. She always says hi to me every time she comes by. She goes, "Just never ends, doesn't it?" And I thought to myself, that's just how sin is. It's just how spiritual warfare is. It just never stops. You just think it's similar. Like, you can even think that you're smarter than it by like uprooting everything and resodding it. It's coming back. Like the seeds are that deep in it, So like the reality of spiritual conflict is like, you don't avoid it. It surprisingly comes up all the time. It's just ongoing. And you think that you're going to get this long season or something of like reprieve. You're not clever. You're not going to outlast the enemy. Only God will. So there's this reality, like, you got to deal with it. So I thought this would be good for us to talk about the ongoing nature. And it immediately brought me the other day to 1 Peter 4. This is what it says. I'm going to read a few verses here, and it'll kind of set our discussion for the rest of the time. It says, "Dear friends, don't be surprised at the fiery ordeal that has come upon to test you, as though something were strange happening to you. But rejoice inasmuch as you're participating in the sufferings of Christ, so that you may be overjoyed when He's revealed. If you're insulted because of the name of Christ, you're blessed, the Spirit of glory and God rests upon you. If you suffer, it shouldn't be for any criminal act. And Peter lists a bunch of different things you can do. And he actually includes meddling in there as well. And however, if you're suffering as a Christian, don't be ashamed, but bear and praise God's name because you bear basically his crown. So what is it saying here? It's saying like this is how we should consider ongoing spiritual warfare. But again, something always grabs me. And I think the first time I read 1 Peter 4 was like when I was like high school or something. And I was always grabbed by when he says, don't be surprised. And I still am. I still am surprised. It's like 30 years later, I'm still surprised when trials come my way. I just am. I'm like, I thought it should be easier by now. So just thought it'd be good. Like, why are we still surprised? Because I am all the time. And I know I'm not supposed to be. I preach to myself not to be, but it always catches me off guard. So why do you think it just keeps surprising you all the time when these fiery ordeals or these spiritual battles enter again into your life? What do you all think?
Maybe you think that, as you're being sanctified over time, that you think that you've outgrown something, or you think that you've conquered it, or something like that, that you think that once it's behind you, that you're not going to have to deal with it again, that it's in the past.
I think it's pretty common. I mean, I think that's probably my default. I think a little bit too, JJ, is like, I think like, didn't we deal with that? Like, didn't that done? Like, didn't we turn the page on that? Like, I think that's probably my default because it does catch me off guard a lot when something comes up or something's rehashed or something that's thematic part of my life comes back again or something. It does seem like that was done, right? Like, that's kind of what it is for me too. So I think that might resonate with me. Yeah.
Well, I think when you're looking at spiritual warfare and persecution, say in the global church, here in the Western world, or at least in America currently, we don't receive a lot of persecution.
Yeah.
And so when we see it, it's very surprising, or the more frequent that it is happening, we're kind of shocked. But if we've spent our whole life as a believer in China, or if you were part of the Nigerian church right now, it would not be surprising to you. But us, when we hear about what's going on in Nigeria, it shocks us, right? But that has become such a part of their daily life that they're not surprised, right? And I think when Paul was speaking to the church too, he was in a time of high persecution where people were in fear of losing their life. And so, don't be surprised.
Don't be surprised.
Right? So for us, we are shocked.
I mean, it really
shocked.
is.
Yeah, and I think there's a nature thing here, right? So we were designed. So we design cars, or we work on cars that were designed for a purpose.
Yeah.
You take a car designed for street driving and you take it off road, the ride experience is going to be pretty terrible. Like, it's not designed for that. We were designed for heaven.
Yeah.
We were designed for Eden.
Yeah.
The choice was ours to step out of that. And so we were now forced into an environment we were not designed for. So we get surprised by it all the time because we settle into comfort and peace and joy because that's actually where we're going to spend eternity. Yeah. But when we are thrown and ushered back into war and it keeps hitting our lives with hard things, we're kind of out of our design zone. So we're not designed for this. The only way to get through it is with help. Right. And I was thinking also about the verse is like, it always shocked me, like, consider it all joy. Like, are you in it? When you're in it, you don't consider it all joy, no one does. But then the Lord reminded me, let me paint two pictures for you. You got one movie you could watch. And one of those movies is you're watching this little old lady sitting on her couch sewing and she eats dinner and then she just goes to bed. And then she does that again. And that's the movie. And so you can watch that movie. Or you can watch an epic battle tearing down evil, ushering and charging into Normandy to take on the biggest battle or the biggest loss of their lives, or the loss of their lives. Yeah. Which movie do you want to watch?
Right. Yeah.
And then ask yourself, which story do you want to live in? Because what the enemy has sold us is the little old lady. It's Lord of the Rings. It's the hobbits in Hobbiton ignoring the War of the Worlds that are happening around them, right? Happening in Nigeria, happening in China. And I've chosen to live my life and watch my own movie waste away in the comfort. Or I could step into the war and start pushing back against darkness, knowing that I'm going into battle. And it was that's the whole Lord of the Rings saga, is being ushered out of this. And it's a choice. It's a choice of which story do you want to live in? Which movie do you want to watch? The reason we want to watch those movies is our heart is longing to be in a part of that story. And the Lord is calling us in to a greater epic. Yeah. And yes, there's peace for eternity. It'll also be epic, right? But we were designed for one thing. We're surprised when it's other, but there's a tendency to try to find Eden here on earth.
Oh, for
and
sure.
to step out of the battle. Yeah. But there's a calling to step into the war because it's necessary for the times we live in. Yeah. And I'd say probably even now more than ever.
Yeah. It's important to stay in battle like that, because we naturally gravitate toward like complacency. Yeah. So when we are in that point in our life where we're trying to stay in our comfort zone, or we get complacent, we start getting dull in our fight, and that's when we can become attacked and really take a hard hit by the enemy or by our lack of attention to it. Yeah. So it's a blessing when we are being whacked.
Yeah, in a way, because it reminds us.
Sharpened, then we're able to see the next one, and we kind of keep the damage down.
That's great, JJ. Yeah, I think that's why I think Peter then says, don't be surprised or consider it strange. I think that word strange is interesting because, again, I think a lot of it has to do with kind of what you're talking about, Josh, is that you said, like, which story do you want to live in? I think we all kind of idealize that, one, we're further along than we are, and two, that God's kingdom's further along than it is. And again, it's been established forever; it will never end. And He's won already, so we want to get that out of the way. But it's this incremental victory too. And we always think that like we're on the steps of Berlin instead of on the beaches of Normandy. Like the reality is, you're somewhere in the middle. You're not as far along as you think. And I think I sometimes kind of think like, we're almost there, right? And then suddenly something happens like, no, we're still on the beach. Like that's, I think, part of why it's so challenging, is because the fight being so intense kind of reminds us that we're still in the thick of the battle with the Lord winning, yes, but incremental victory is how it also works. And he says, don't think it's strange that you're in this firefight for your life. Yeah. Because, man, it does feel strange sometimes, because like, didn't we beat those people already? So that being said, we'll kind of move to this next part. Peter kind of then goes on and says, okay, victory looks like this, not like this. Spiritual warfare looks like this, not like this. He says that there are certain things that we're suffering not because of Jesus. And he says, don't be suffering those things. So he kind of makes this discrepancy, this distinction between suffering for wrongs we're doing versus suffering for Christ, who is our joy. So why do you think it's important to make that distinction? Why do you think it's important? Because he does take some time to make a distinction there, because in the warfare that's going on, sometimes we're misdiagnosing it.
Naturally, right? We're a victim naturally.
Yeah. That's right. So maybe it helps us remember that we're not always a victim in every situation. Yeah. Right? That's part of it, I think. What other reasons you all think that, Peter makes a real clear distinction here of like, hey, this is suffering in spiritual warfare in a positive way, and this is you're just getting shot up by yourself, kind of thing. So why does he do this? How does this help us?
When you victimize yourself and think that, that you're being persecuted against because of your own actions, you can't claim that that you're being persecuted for Christ. You know what I mean? There's people that are legit being persecuted for Christ, like Nigeria. Yes. And those people are legit living a nightmare, but they're going to be rewarded greatly for that. That's right. And the things that we here in America, because we're pretty spoiled here, we've had it really good, had it made for quite some time. We can get very offended and hurt by someone, rejecting our gospel outreach.
Like reputation or something.
Yeah, like that's such a offense to us. Yes. But there's bigger things out there that are worth being persecuted for.
Yeah. So it's kind of the difference between actually living for Christ, and getting persecuted for that, and then just kind of doing our own thing as a Christian, and then thinking somehow that Christ is going to honor that, because we're meddling in someone's business. I mean, again, I think it's fascinating that Peter's like, hey, if you get put in prison for being a murderer, like that's not suffering for Christ. Yeah. That's you being a murderer, right? And then he goes all the way to the point of saying, and also you meddlers. I was like, wow. That's a lot of Christians, actually. They love to meddle in other people's business. They love to meddle in other people's lack of sanctification or whatever, and not focus on themselves at all. You know, not give any attention to themselves. And then God says, well, if you get yourself into a mess on that, that's your own mess. So there's something there that like helps us, I think, recognize like what's real spiritual warfare versus like our own messes we make, right? Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if you all want to add anything to that, but I mean, that gives me pause. Right? It makes me pause. Think, am I making my own messes here, or is this really for Christ?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
One time I thought I was in like a lot of spiritual warfare. Mm-hmm. I thought there was battles going on all around me, and I was talking to Jesus, and he turned to me and he goes, you know what your problem is? Self-pity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your problem is self-pity.
Yeah.
And I had a new enemy to name, and sometimes it's pride.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's offense.
Yeah.
There are all these things that just dwell inside of us and just keep coming back and you try to get rid of it, but it just keeps coming.
Yeah.
And it, I think it's really important to take a self-inventory, an honest one, kind of like step out of yourself for a moment, that you're always right, and examine yourself. David said, examine me, my heart, O Lord, and expose to me the imperfect places. And it's a great place to go with the Lord, because you can receive it way better when he says it. It was like, if anybody else said it, it would not come across well. But when he says it, oh yeah, you're right. Absolutely. I got that. Yeah, I'll work on that. I'm going to get better. But it was, sometimes we don't, the warfare is hard enough. We don't need to add to the enemy's ammunition. Exactly right. We don't need to give him free blows at ourselves. Yeah. Right. And so we have to think about it. It does help to think about it in the terms of war, because then you start exposing strategy. Yeah. You start thinking about tactics. Yeah. You start thinking more accurately. I think that's why they use that term in the Bible, about like how to navigate said thing, especially if you've never experienced it, or if you stepped into working with us, you're probably going to experience warfare, because we're pushing hard against the enemy. Yeah. And when you actually start stepping in there, you're like, oh, wow. Okay. Well, this is what spiritual warfare is, or maybe you have no grid for that, so you don't understand. But it's important to not give him free access to the ammunition against your own life.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to kind of pause, like you said, take inventory, because when you're in battle, there's a lot that can go wrong. There's just a lot that can go wrong, and I think also remembering that part of the spiritual life is a war. It brings, like you said, strategy and map and destination and teamwork and all these other, there's a lot of other variables at play. So I think what he's saying here in logistical warfare terms, he's saying there's a difference between Satan's strategy and your own self-sabotage. It seems like what he's saying. It's like you can sabotage yourself just fine if you want, and don't call that spiritual warfare. You just blew yourself up, right? Whereas, the enemy certainly can. One of the greatest books ever written on spiritual warfare is this book by this old Puritan named John Owen called Temptation. And he says that the enemy, you might not be seeing him, but he's burrowing into the ground, setting a trap. Like he's underneath the castle, destroying the foundation of your life. Like, yes, but not everything. He doesn't have to do that to you all the time. Mm-hmm. Sometimes he just lets you just blow yourself up. And I think what he's saying there is that part of the spiritual warfare is taking stock of yourself and making sure you're not destroying yourself before Satan gets after you. And I think there's part of that we have to say, take pause, take inventory, and make sure I'm not just blowing myself up before I get to the fight.
I think a great example of this is like early Christians often hear about their story, and they're like, maybe they were an alcoholic.
Yeah.
My story is addiction to alcohol, and that's where the enemy ripped my whole life apart. Yeah. And then I feel called to go and preach at bars. Probably not.
Yeah. Don't do
Probably not. You know what I'm saying? So like it's like they haven't taken a true self-inventory or a true look at themselves to say, these are my weaknesses, so I will not err by just exposing that weak part of myself to the enemy to take easy blows, to trap you, right? And so there's some self-inventory is a really helpful, honest look at yourself, and not in a destructive way, which is often what the enemy does. It's like, and this is wrong with you, and this is wrong with you. No, it is to say, I need to find out like truly where I need to be spending time with the Lord on and praying about and asking for help in, not to beat you down, because all those things have been paid for by the blood of Jesus. Right. So like, let's just set that to the side. Now let's just talk about, living life and trying to help yourself function in a world that's fallen, right? And there is a way out. And when you're fighting a war, another thing is like, if you're calm, you're going to operate better on the front lines. Mm-hmm. Those that seem courageous are those that are calm. They also are the ones that can actually operate and think.
Yeah, and do something positive.
And it's very hard when you're in it. Very hard when you're in it to think critically about what's going on and then move in the proper direction. That is one of the hardest. That shows spiritual maturity in this, is if you can be in it, and regardless of what you're feeling, you're saying the right thing. My dad, before he passed, would do this thing. I call it, you grit your teeth and speak love. Yeah. And he would, I could just see like this part of his, jaw just clenching when I would like talk back with such disrespect as a teenager. Mm-hmm. But what came out of his mouth was always love. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's just a sign of spiritual maturity. So when you're in it and you're gritting, and yes, it's hard and it's terrible, and you're feeling that thing, you know what I'm talking about. You're in it, you're in the spiral, whether it's a fight with your spouse or it's someone just cut you off in traffic, whatever the enemy uses to make you just rage. Yeah. But when you're in that moment, just speak love and just zero in on the things you've been taught. Some things you get in you habitually so that the habits take over rather than your mind or what is going on or what the enemy has a stronghold there. Is just operate in that. And so regardless of how you feel, and I often practice this by when my worst times, I try to go worship because it's a special kind of worship that can only be happening here on earth that you can only offer here. Heaven's perfect. Yeah. You can only offer that to the Lord here. Like when my leg broke, the first thing that came out was worship. Right. And I was worshiping until the fire department came and, set me in the ambulance. But that is a thing that it only happened because thousands of times before I would worship, and that's what came out of me, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So you practice in the off season so that when you're in it, your habits take over. Yeah. The thing that Lord got in you in the good times can actually get you the result you want in that time. To maybe not blow up your marriage, or maybe to make a good decision at work, or to maybe advance and love your kids at that critical moment where you could lose them.
Spiritual muscle memory.
That's right. Correct. That's right, correct. And that's exactly what happened. That's what they train into soldiers.
That's what they train into.
Being able to be under fire, doing it many times, so that whenever you're out there, you can operate in it. And I think that's why the boring parts of Christianity, like spiritual disciplines and spending time in your Bible and thinking and forgiving people on a regular basis, being generous on a regular basis. Right. When the Lord tests you with lots of money and finally you're the rich ruler and it's Jesus in front of you, are you going to say yes? Yeah. Because did you give up money many times before? Yeah. It's the practice of doing till you get to the big moment where you really need it. Yeah.
I love how y'all are kind of showing the contrast here, because I think there could be seen this kind of negative sense of, you can blow your life up pretty easily, but there's a sense of like you've got to do spiritual warfare yourself in yourself. Yeah. And I think he's saying that your character is part of spiritual warfare. And I think that I preached a sermon on that one before, like part of spiritual warfare is just growing as a person and growing. Like you've got to be willing to grow. You got to be willing to want to not just not do something, but to do something, and to actually be someone who is neighborly, to be someone who wants to do these things, not just has to do these things. And so I think he's saying, hey, grow your own character, not in the negative way, but grow. Don't sabotage yourself. Grow, but also as you grow, you're going to get persecuted and be assaulted by spiritual forces that you can't even see. Yeah. And you got to be kind of seeing it from both perspectives. I think he's saying. Now, there's an interesting way that we'll conclude with this. There's an interesting way Peter concludes, with some encouragement. He challenges us instead of just encouraging us. And again, no one likes to be challenged, but when it's God speaking, I guess we better listen here. And he says this at the very end: "For it is time for judgment to begin with the house of God." And then he says, "For what will the outcome be for those who do not obey the gospel of God? If it is hard for someone to be saved who's righteous, how much more will it become for an ungodly sinner?" It's like, wow, what an encouragement. "So then, those who suffer according to God's will should commit themselves to their faithful Creator and continue to do good, So I thought there's two ways he's trying to put this. One, notice he didn't challenge the world. He challenged the church. He didn't say, oh, you godless world. He said, you church, it's God's come for you. It's like, what is happening? It's kind of like the oldest of the four in your family, like the parents the hardest on the oldest, kind of thing. And so first, how does Peter's challenge help you engage with spiritual warfare? How does that give you greater wisdom or perspective when God's like, look, his judgment, his testing, it begins with his people, not with the world. He'll come to that later on, right? But right now, he's focusing on like, I'm going to test you. And that's part of the spiritual warfare of your life. So how does that give you perspective knowing that's how God deals with things?
Makes me feel loved and wanted.
Yeah.
And when I am going through those rough, tough things that are really discouraging, that I know that because I'm going through that I am saved, that I'm going through this because I'm saved, and I am, going through this type of warfare because God is growing me.
That's fantastic.
I'm going through these things because God wants to mature me.
That's right. That's a fantastic perspective.
That's
right.
To help
in
your life.
That's right. It's a challenge that has a purpose to it. It's not just for its own sake, right? Like you're saying, JJ, it's so great perspective you shared there. Is that like, because I'm righteous, he expects more from me. And he's going to put me through some things to use me and to utilize me and to grow me. Otherwise, I don't know if he's my father, right? And that's certainly how the Bible talks, right? Whereas, when the Pharisees are like, hey, God's our dad. He's like, no, he's not. It's like, whoa, because they've not really been through testing of what it looks like to be God's children. So that's a fantastic perspective, JJ. Anyone else? What does that tell you about God's way with using spiritual warfare in a positive way? What does it say to you?
I think there's only a few things you can carry with you into eternity.
Yeah.
One of those is character.
Yeah.
Who you are, what you believe, what you've experienced, and what you've gone through. It's one of the only things, that's why he values it so much.
Yeah.
Money, stuff, things you build. I love cars, but they're not coming with me to heaven.
Yeah, unfortunately.
It's this thing he's trying to get into us. And it seems so much that he cares far more about our character than our calling. Yeah. And so I think it's because it's eternal in nature, right? And he cares about the eternal things. And he cares because he wants us, what we do in this life is like an accelerant to how we get, what job we get in eternity.
That's right.
And so if you do the work here, oh man, what do you have ahead of you?
Right.
And then it says, consider it all joy, my brothers, when you go through trials of many kind. And because eventually he's producing character, right, which is the end of that verse. But there is a great reward.
That's right.
And these momentary sufferings in our life are nothing compared to the eternal joy the Lord has in store for us. And so it's all these scriptures that you hear about that because he's trying to get you ready for that. Without resistance, a trainer is not going to be, or an athlete is not going to be as good. If they only play in their backyard on their own goal and never have an opponent, they will never be a great basketball player. If they only run at sea level, they will never be a great runner because they didn't go to the higher elevations and have to challenge their body in today's environments. If they haven't played against the best players in the world, they won't know what it is. And so the Lord, although didn't will this for us, has used this for us, used it to get us to be some of the best athletes and the best leaders, because he's raising kings and queens. He's not just raising citizens of heaven. He's raising royalty. Do you not know that you will judge angels? It says in the Bible,
which is wild.
You are being
it's a wild
front row trained for epic things that you could only dream about.
That's right.
And you actually can't dream that big. And so some of the things that are and character is required for every bit of that, right? Character is required for every story in the Bible, and is also the thing that failed all the kings of the past. And so it's one of these eternal things, and so it's just super important.
I love how you focused on to kind of piggyback off what JJ's saying is that notice what God cares about the most. He cares about refining us, and sometimes we think he cares about other things, and then we get surprised, like, man, he's really locked in on me. It's like, good grief. Like, he won't let me go. He's going to keep after this until I get it well enough to keep moving on. And then also the piece up on the resistance. I love that you bring that up because, again, Satan has some power, but man, he has no power compared to God. But God will use him
Yes.
And he will use the enemies for our good, which is insane to think about. I've met some darkness in my life. I've met some real darkness in my life. However, I am godlier now because of it. Not because I'm good, because God's used it to make me more like him through all the trial and error of my life. And the reality is, I think that's kind of what he's saying. He's like, look, he's not judging us in some kind of punishing way. He's bringing real resistance and real difficulty to us to refine us, to show, hey, my church will overcome the devil. That's kind of what he's saying here. My church will overcome even the greatest resistance because I've already overcome the world, Jesus says. So I think it has a lot to do with that. Yeah. It's kind of like when great athletes say, I want to play the best to be the best. And I think it's a little bit like that. He's saying, I'll throw the worst against you to show you that we will overcome. I think that's a little bit of what's going on. But it doesn't feel like that when you're going through it, right? Well, we'll finish with this. He encourages us with this. Those who suffer according to God's will should commit themselves to the Creator and keep doing good. Much of encouragement. So how does that help you to keep going? Because I don't know about you, but there are many times like, you know what? I think that's it. I think I'll go ahead and quit today. This is the end of the road. I think it's too exhausting, too tiring, too much. And we all have those thoughts in our minds. So how does that encourage you to keep going in the spiritual fight? Because the fight's not done until we reach glory. It's not over today. It's still going. I'd like it to be over today, but it's not my timetable. So how does that keep encouraging us to keep going when we want to quit or we want to give up?
I just think that I'm like so unworthy that I'm just like, stoked that the Lord even wants anything to do with me.
Yeah.
So that's what keeps me going, man.
Yeah. Same, brother. It's amazing that he still considers me and keeps growing me and keeps using me and has not quit on me. That's exactly right. I mean, it's awesome. That's great, JJ.
I think it's, you go through a lot of things and you have to fight through it to get to where you're going. Yeah. But I've never doubted his love.
Yeah.
And if you get to know him, you never doubt his love.
Yeah.
So, the mission I could probably give up on. The stuff that people, the people probably could give up on.
Yeah.
But man,
I can't give up on him.
I can't give up on him. It's like if you got your best friend you've had in your whole life, and you'll go to war for them.
Yeah.
Right. You'll give your life, and it's what he talks about. The greatest love is this: that someone will give their life for another. And it's like when you've encountered that kind of love, and that's someone who's rooting for you that much, and helps you all along the way, and never fails you. It's hard. It's hard not to follow a king like that. And I think it's not the mission; it's the king.
It's the king. That's right.
I love the idea.
Great idea.
It doesn't sound like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But for you, I'll do it.
Yeah.
I think that's the only thing that anchors in the really hard stuff. Yeah.
It's really encouraging.
What you did for me.
Yeah. Because what you did for me.
That's exactly right. I think
I didn't deserve it.
The good news, I think, what I've experienced in my own life is that when you reach those times, sometimes more than you want to admit, is that he doesn't just say, hey, get up, come on. No, he comes back to you. He resuscitates you. He puts the sword back in your hand. He puts you on his shoulder, and he carries you to the next spot, and then you go in. So it's not as if he's like left you there, and he's like, come on, man. No. He goes back, he bandages you, he cares for you, he resuscitates you, and he says, come on. And that's the good news. Again, it's this. He ends with this encouragement because it's not up to us. He's the king. But we won't give up on him because he will not give up on us. It's just the truth. It's just that's how it always works. So even when you're like, hey, I can't go any further, you go on. He's like, I'm not moving ahead until you come with me. It's like how it always works with God. So again, challenging text, ongoing nature of spiritual warfare, not fun. No one wants to keep this going, but he's got a plan in it. And he continues to use us, and he continues to resuscitate us and strengthen us for this. So until next time, sign off. Well, thanks so much for watching today's episode of C.A.R.s, Coffee and Christ, the podcast of Cross Automotive Royale here in Mounds, Oklahoma. And if you were helped by today's discussion, we hope that you'll like and subscribe to the podcast. We also hope that you'll go check us out online at crossautomotiveroyale.com. You're going to find there two things. One, if you're interested in car work and restoration, there are several ways that you can connect with us online at our website. If you're also interested in ministry work in partnerships, particularly to the car community, but also to minister to others in general, you'll find on that same website an additional website, carsfromchrist.org. And there you'll find our car clinic, opportunities to support you if you're a member of one of our member churches, and also find ways to donate vehicles or finances to help us donate vehicles to families in need around the Tulsa Metroplex. So hope that you will connect with us, subscribe to our channel, and hope to hear from you soon. Until next time.